It's a full-time job. There's only one man that can do it in just 2 hours, even though he'd love to have 5. This is The Will Anderson Show on Talk Radio for Real Life.
And hello to all in the Valley. This is The Will Anderson Show. Right here on WTKI, WEKI. So glad you're with us. And delighted as always to be back with you as well. Phone number to call if you'd like to participate in today's symposium. Area code 256-684-8000. Our email address, will at WTKIRadio.com. The website, Dripping with Wisdom. WTKIRadio.com. We're on Facebook as well. Check us out there. Keywords, The Will Anderson Show. See, I told you it was dripping. And follow us on Twitter, Will Anderson Show, no W at the end, no D up front. It is my distinguished and sincere honor to be joined in studio by Scott Phillips, author of Remove Before Flight.
All right.
Welcome to the program, my friend.
Well, thank you, Will. Appreciate being here.
Now, for someone who has no idea who you are, be immodest like I am frequently on this show when talking about myself.
Man. Oh, man, you're giving me an inch, I'll take a mile.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, hey, it turned out that I had an opportunity coming out of high school to get involved in the new space shuttle program back in 1978.
Right.
And just turned 19 at the time, and I went into a building that had all this hardware in, and it was very exciting. And I knew I was on to something big. And so as time went on, we were headed towards the flight program, which was in 1981. And got to stay on the program to that point. And
now, what was the new hardware? Because
well,
this, yep. I know some people are thinking this leads up to the Challenger, for instance.
Well, before the first shuttle went up, we had to actually verify on the external tank, which is the largest element of the shuttle. It's the backbone of the shuttle and holds 536,000 gallons of fuel. And we had to verify before the first shuttle went up that the seams, or the weld seams, would hold the fuel on the ascend. Now, this vehicle travels at 17,000 miles an hour, and the fuel pushes down as it's, ascending. And so our job actually was to verify through stress analysis. In other words, we loaded these vehicles with mud to simulate the weight of the oxygen, the liquid oxygen. And
you try to make them go through the worst possible scenario,
that's
really.
Right. That's exactly right. And so I found myself as a 19-year-old involved in that testing. And a lot of the guys that were around me were the Apollo guys. And so they were mentoring this young guy.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in a lot of precarious positions and in confined environments and things that were pretty dangerous.
Sure.
And we were writing the procedures because we had never done this before. And so anyhow, one of the stories, of course, in my book, Removed Before Flight, is that there's a story called Mudman. And it turned out that after we verified the external tank's capacity to carry the 36,000 gallons of fuel, successfully, we had to drain the mud out of the tank and clean the residue off because we had further testing. And so they picked me.
I was going to say, how does the whole process go? And I didn't even think about that part. That's got to be a pain in the you-know-what.
In fact, the prologue in my book to start it out is a story called Mudman, obviously. And so I found myself in a confined environment dangling 65 feet in the air with a water hose hosing the vehicle down to clean the muds out.
Wow.
But I didn't tell you the kicker to the book I wrote in. The outcome was I had an oxygen tank on, and as we were about 40 feet, 2 hours into the mission, my air hose popped off, and I was in a confined environment. And of course, oxygen was not to be had. So I yelled into my mic, and they had a boat winch that actually I was attached to, and they were manually bringing me out. It took me 15 minutes to get out.
You sound nervous just recalling the story, and I would have had a heart attack, by the way.
Well, what happens is I was spinning because I'm on a thin cable, so I'm actually, when I'm spraying the vehicle down, the reverberation, in other words, the water pressure caused the tank to reverberate, causing a lot of noise. So I was fatigued by the noise. And then when my oxygen went out, my face mask clouded over, so I was blinded. So what I had to do as I was coming up, I wanted to know how much further I had to go. And so I licked the inside of my helmet to get a view of the manhole cover I had to come out. It was the size of a dime. And I don't know about you, but being with no oxygen, very little oxygen, and covered in mud and dizzy, looking up at a hole that was my only exit was the size of a dime.
Sure.
Scared the what out of me. But
of course,
we got out. I'm here to talk about it, so I lived. But these were the procedures we were writing. So there was actually no incident report made. In fact, my quality safety folks said, well, you lived. Let's rewrite the procedures. So it turned out that the mud had actually loosened my air hose clip. It was a lubricant, and that's what caused. So we put a latch on the hose and redid the noise with the sound suppression, for the earplugs and everything. So I actually was the guinea pig.
Would there have been a way to have stress tested? That's not the right phrase, is it?
Well,
the shuttle without mud.
Well,
is my question.
Well, here's the thing: is the tank itself was holding two fuels, and in the what they call the forward ogive area, the top part that we all saw when the beanie cap came off, held the liquid oxygen, which is the oxidizer. In other words, like your carburetor in your car, you need oxygen for the gas to flow. So you don't have any, obviously, oxygen in space, so you need to take your own oxygen with you. So the oxygen is very heavy, and the weight was about, the tank's weight is 1.6 million pounds. So the tank's weight on that was 76,000 empty. In other words, 76,000 pounds empty, but with it loaded was 1.6 million pounds. So the liquid,
it's mind-boggling.
It blows your mind. So, but the mud was the closest we could come.
I see.
To really simulate with, because it's liquid oxygen and hydrogen are very volatile.
Now, is that how they still do it today, or have they changed the?
Today they do it differently. In fact, they of course use our model, from years ago. So a lot of the vehicles that we have today, of course, are heritage from the shuttle. The next vehicle going up, SLS, will have solid rocket boosters that actually came off the shuttle. But it'll be 5-segment as opposed to 4-segment boosters. So we're using a lot of heritage stuff that we've already proven.
So here's the question I have for you, and Rachel has several questions for you.
All right.
After the break, we have to go to the break before the computer cuts us off.
All right.
And by the way, if you're just tuning in, my guest is Scott Phillips, author of Remove Before Flight. He was on the shuttle. He's going to tell us about that in the next segment. But my question is, would the private sector do this more efficiently?
Well, there's
and that's the tease question.
Right.
Because in about 2 seconds, we're gone. We'll be back.
Sounds good.
The official healthcare provider for our mascot, Tiki, is Catisfaction Cat Clinic in Madison. Talk radio for real life. WTKI.
And we're back. This is the Will Anderson Show. I'm Rachel Hammers. We are here with our very intriguing guest, Scott Phillips. Remove Before Flight. So you were going to tell us something big before the break.
Well, the opportunity to write the book for me was an opportunity to tell the next generation, attach yourself to something larger than yourself. Now, I was 10 years old when we landed on the moon, and I was actually 80 miles north of Wapakoneta, Ohio, is where I was born. And so I was inspired by an Ohioan, Neil Armstrong, and I didn't know how to really exercise the fact that I wanted to be attached to something larger. So serendipitously, my father moved us to Huntsville, Alabama, by the way of many different places, but I knew I had to be prepared as a teenager. In other words, I had a love for woodworking, but I found myself in a situation in school where I wanted to do my work. I wanted to do the right thing, and I had a good attitude. And my brother and my father, helped me out with my work ethic. So it was very important for young people to not only be inspired by the previous generation, which I had no dog in the race. The previous generation inspired me by landing on the moon, so I was prepared. But years later, at a 19-year-old situation, I had an opportunity to get on the program, and I could honestly say that I had a good work ethic and I had an ability to learn. So I had an opportunity to get on the program, and then I took my love for the woodcrafting and adopted that and developed my passion within my vocation. So as I'm rocking along, obviously we're doing the thing, and then Challenger hits us. And so I go through the hard times, like everybody will, with a death or a job reversal, whatever. My boss retired at that time, and I was 26 years old. I had a $10 million inventory on my head, and I could have quit. I could have just said, I can't cut it. But I decided to belly up to the bar, and I did it. It took me 33 months, and I became a seasoned individual. So as I'm rocking along, I had an opportunity to find the most important thing that anybody can run into, and I want to tell this next generation, is to value unconditional love. And I know it sounds corny, but the thing is that gives you the purpose in life. It also sustains you because you have wisdom, to counsel with the loved one that you have. So I got married late in life, but I found unconditional love was my purpose and gave me really a strength to move forward, especially during the hard times. And then when you get down to the point where you're ending your career, as the shuttle course went out, and I had a chance to invest in myself to write this book. And I would suggest everybody think about their legacy. We're all going to, end our career someday. We're all going to, die, in the sense that I felt compelled to write my memoir describing the fantastic opportunity I had on the shuttle program, and because the shuttle program turned out to be about people. The hardware was cool, it was great, it was beautiful, but whenever it lifted off that pad, it was Jim, Sally, Sue. It was the people that made it happen.
Yes.
And so the book is mainly from my perspective about dealing with thousands of people that I dealt with through those years. And
what do you think your legacy is?
Well, my legacy is for my family to tell them what I did, had an opportunity to do. The shuttle itself was the most complex vehicle devised by man. And I attached myself to the fact that we've rewritten the cosmology books for the world. We've inspired millions of people. The American people felt the shuttle gave us the leadership that we needed around the country, around the world, so we were respected. As you notice today, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars with the Russians, and no one really feels good about that because we're not having our own capability. And it's about the next generation.
And I wanted to, not to interrupt, I wanted to ask you about that. Mm-hmm. The space program for so many has been such a source of pride.
Absolutely.
For the United States.
Well, it's the crown jewel. It's the crown jewel of what we stand for as a nation, as leading in the auto industry like we did in the 19th century. We don't lead today. There's other countries now that lead in the auto industry. And textiles, same thing. We've given that up. Electronics, things like that. But we've always maintained our aerospace capacity, and we're respected around the world because of what we do.
Well, when we come back, I want to ask you more about, going from being the pride of the United States with the space program and that to where you think the direction is going now with us giving up more and more of our capabilities.
Right. Absolutely.
And I want to go to, and by the way, Scott Phillips, the book is Removed Before Flight. And I haven't read it yet, I admit. However, I'm intrigued by the title. I want to ask you about that.
Fantastic.
Because you gave me this, and I have a theory, and you may call me a kook, but I have a theory as to why you chose that as the title to this book.
Great.
So we'll see if I'm right.
Okay.
Most interviewers would say, what's the reason why you had the title? I'm going to tell you what I think it was.
Okay.
And then you can kook me if I'm wrong. Stay with us.
All right.
For local news and community events anytime, go to yournews.com. Talk radio for real life. WEKI.
Welcome back. We are having all sorts of fun on this Monday edition of the Will Anderson Show. Happy 8th of December. Whatever that's worth. 256-684-8000. Rachel and I carrying you into this segment. For those just joining us, Scott Phillips, author of Remove Before Flight, is our guest. You had a question for Scott before I get to the title.
I did. I wanted to know from where it went being such a point of pride for the United States, the NASA program and spaceflight in general, to where you see it moving now.
Well, NASA, of course, been around for over 50 years, and there was always a add-on program after we had Mercury, of course, and then went on to Gemini, and then of course went on to Apollo, and then Apollo-Soyuz, and then the space station, Skylab, and then of course in the shuttle. So that was 30 years for the shuttle. So it was really kind of unprecedented that when the new administration came in and diminished for us the follow-on program, which was the Constellation program, which was described by President Bush to go back to the moon for this next generation.
Now,
yeah.
Let me stop you there. Why is that important? And I think I know the answer because I have a good friend who's a contractor for NASA.
All right.
I won't mention his name. I think it's important that we go back to the moon as almost like and it's my words, not his, a rest area of sorts for Mars.
Well, yeah. I mean, you get an RV, and the first time you're driving an RV is if you're not going to drive it directly to the Grand Canyon, you're going to drive it up to Montesano and get the feel of it.
Right.
So, I mean, if there's a problem, you can come on home and kind of figure it out. But
so we aren't just doing it to say we went back to the moon.
No, the thing is,
rights.
we have very little time on the moon. Even back in the 6 trips that we took and the 12 men that were on there, that's very small. I mean, it was a 40, 50 hour if you add it all up. So that's not enough time.
Right.
So if you're really serious about settling, a planetary body, you have to get serious about how you're going to sustain, human life. And the moon, of course, is 240,000 miles away. That's a 3-4 day trip. So if we have a problem, we can come back. Now, Mars is mind-boggling. It's 50, at the right area, it's 50 million miles out. It's a long way out. And there's a psychological involved. But the fact that you want to be able to stair-step, when this country was founded, not everybody got off the Mayflower and walked to California. They stopped in Pennsylvania, settled, and then they had a way station. And then the next people behind them went to there, were rested, and then made it to Ohio, settled, and then so on and so forth until they really made it out there. So I think the using that mindset is to do the same into space, to reach out incrementally. And I think in our generation, certainly we started that with the landing man on the moon in '69, and of course we've learned a lot about low Earth orbit at this point. We've built the International Space Station, which is the largest structure. The pharaohs of Egypt would have adored to have that capability.
Well, you were talking about the infrastructure that it's ours for the most part. Right. Even with regard to those in the private sector who say, I could get us to Mars, and I know there are many who can, and no offense intended to them, but let's face it, NASA gave them the vehicle that's driving them to wherever they're going.
Well, I mean, it's infrastructure like the launch complexes and of course, the knowledge, the engines and the technology has been transferred to private industry. And really that's what NASA is really about, is transferring that knowledge. American taxpayers pay for that, and they should benefit from that. And so private industry, it's important that private industry picks up on that. But they do get subsidized by the government. When a SpaceX or a company gets out there, they're getting subsidy from the American people. And there's not a pure privatization like, starting your own business and, nobody supports you there. You have to either make it or you don't. So,
but it's a national security thing on some fronts, isn't
Well,
it?
sure it is. I mean, a lot of the assets that we have on orbit today, run our munitions and our, a lot of people say, well, I didn't get hit by that tornado last week. It's like, why? Well,
Right.
because I turned on the Weather Channel. It's
Exactly.
like, well, where did the Weather Channel get the information? Well, the global positioning systems and the weather satellites.
Point is, that's a justified federal expenditure.
Absolutely. In fact, saved millions of lives. I mean, obviously when we had the tornadoes last few years, I knew 3-4 days ahead of time to prepare. Back in 100 years ago, 50 years ago, we just kind of looked out the window and boom, we got hit. So you put a price on that? I mean, that's technologies, and we're, of course, all hooked to these cell phones and hooked to the technology we have. Think of this, Will. Think of this. And Rachel. 5,000 years of recorded man's history. What did we do for 4,900 of those years?
Technologically, nothing.
We rode horses.
Yes, exactly.
So in the last 100 years, we have automobiles, electricity, of course, medicines, those types of things. In the last 50 years, we have man on another planet, a planetary body being the moon. And then the last 10 years or so, we've actually seen a sunset from a planetary from Mars. So we live in fantastic times, and like I say, just in the last century. So for 4,900 years, we rode horses. The last 100 years, we have this technology, and it's going faster and faster and faster.
And wow, when you put it into perspective like that, you realize how far into the infancy of this that we really are. Like, I mean,
point.
all this took place before I was born.
Yes. Well,
So-
me too, for that matter.
Yep.
Well, the year I was born, we landed on the moon.
Okay.
Right.
So
That may be coincidence.
all of this, by time I was learning about the landing on the moon and that, it was history. It was in my history book. So
Yeah.
to put it in perspective like that, though, this is so new. And what do you think about all these new unmanned space? What do you think the most significant finding so far has been?
It's here again. Mars is our closest sister in the sense of a planet to settle. Now think of this. I personally believe it'll take 5 generations to settle that planet. But as we march forward, this generation will be a Noah's Ark. They'll decide the music, and they'll decide great music, but they'll decide the music, the laws, the values, the language. So this is a very noble cause for our species because we are a one-planet species. We could be wiped out by an asteroid. I mean, it sounds funny, but the moon could get hit also, so we have a double whammy. So
I do worry about that.
we need to be able to move off this planet if we're going to save our species. And
Wow.
yeah.
Hold that thought, because that fascinates me.
Uh-oh.
Is this in the book?
A little bit.
That's
yeah.
fascinating.
Okay, well, like chapter 13, I think.
Stay with us, my friends. I don't have time, but we'll be back.
Dennis Prager, weekday mornings at 11 on Talk Radio for Real Life, 1490 AM and 94.7 FM, WEKI.
To order them right now.
Ken Creel answers your lawn and garden questions Saturday mornings at 10 on Talk Radio for Real Life, 1490 AM and 94.7 FM, WEKI.
Who?
Welcome back. This is
Oh,
the Will
okay.
Anderson Show. I'm Rachel Hammers. We are here with Scott, the Shuttleman Phillips, and his book, Remove Before Flight.
We were just talking about who would play him in a movie. And I answered the question, and it was Kevin Bacon.
All right.
The Shuttleman.
I can live with that.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like that.
Decent
Yeah.
choice. It just popped into my head right before I said it.
Shoot you.
Who did Brian say he looked like when you were looking at that paperwork earlier?
Oh, I don't remember.
I don't either. That's the wrong story. I don't know.
In a world full of asteroids.
It wasn't a Hollywood person. That's all that
I thought it was Dennis Miller. Was that it? Brian, is that who you said?
Yes.
Okay.
It was Dennis Miller.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, I can live with that.
And he's acted before. He's been in movies.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
Shoot.
I don't know which one of them knows more about space. Which is an interesting question for me. How do you go from being an engineer and somebody actually on the shuttle? Because I could write a book if I wanted to, but this is what I do for a living. I'm a talk guy. I was a philosophy major, but I can't change a light bulb without breaking it. How do you transfer those talents?
Well, first, can you explain to the people who don't know exactly what you did, what your job on the shuttle was?
Okay. Well, before STS-1 launched on April 12th, 1981, we had to do what they call a shakedown. And the shakedown included going internal inside the external tank. Now, my product was the external tank. So I was actually on a test team of some elite people, and I was the youngest. I was very young, and they were like 10 years older than me. But anyhow, we had to do a shakedown of the tank, and we had issues with the tank, and it had what they call an eco-sensor issue, called an engine cutoff sensor, which later plagued us in the program. But STS-1 had the problem, so we went to Kennedy Space Center, put this access kit in to access the tank in a vertical position, and I was...
That's like a reserve tank, maybe?
Well, it was actually the external... It was ET-1. It was actually the bird itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
We actually went in, and so we actually found two things. We found a spliced wire that had broken, and a remove before flight sticker that was not removed from the eco sensor, and we replaced the eco sensor. We got an award for doing it. It would have been an incompatibility if STS-1 would have launched with that incompatibility inside the tank or the failed eco sensor. It might have exploded. So this is the margins that we were running on STS-1. Bob Crippen and John Young flew the shuttle without a test flight. They actually got on that shuttle and launched that shuttle for the first time. They did not have a test flight. So everything was riding on that. So I really took a lot of pride from that.
That's a lot of pressure.
It was. In fact, I look back at it today. But I wrote it. I wrote a lot of my firsthand stuff down, and I had a journal that I actually wrote all the stuff that I did. I was a bachelor, and I didn't really have anything else to do but work 12-hour days, 7 days a week. I worked 12-hour days, 7 days a week for 3 years. I bought a little Volkswagen Rabbit and drove around in that.
Did you think you were going to write a book, or did
never?
You just...
No, I knew I was in something larger than myself. I came from humble beginnings when I was a kid growing up, and I always wanted to hear again, attach myself to something larger. And I knew the shuttle program was my ticket. I knew it. I said, "This is big. This is big for the." I'm looking around, so I'm snapping pictures right and left. I'm documenting everything because I know with good things come to an end. So I maintained that. I actually kept all the history of the external tanks manufacturer. I own a lot of the DD-250s that we sold the tanks to the government. I mean, I have memorabilia. I probably have one of the best shuttle memorabilia collections in the country because I just was there. And so, but at the end of my career, my wife, Diane, she's a wonderful lady, she said, "You got all this stuff. You got a book in you." And sure enough, I had the first pictures that were never published before behind the scenes. And so I had an opportunity, and she found my story, and she found my voice, and helped me write the stories. And
now does she, so, and right now I'm just talking about the nuts and bolts of the book because I can't wait to read it.
Right.
Did she actually help you craft, obviously, it's your story, but did she help you write the book?
Yeah, she did. In fact, she is a writer.
Okay.
And, and I depended a lot on her. Of course, I write too, but there's things, that you have to have somebody help you find your voice. And I had a tendency to prattle on about, what I accomplished and what I did. But she said nobody's interested in what you did. They want to know how they fit into the book, how they would have done it.
She probably said, "Take this page and condense it into one paragraph."
Show, don't tell. That's the rule. That's the rule, and I learned about writing is show, don't tell.
I'm gonna remember that.
It was a blessing for her. And in fact, she's listening to today. Diane, I love you because you did a great job. But so she's, of course, on the cover of the book also. So she takes pride in it too. And my two boys, I have a 14 and 15-year-old. They're coming around, and because it took 3.5 years to write it, they always say, "When's the book going to be done?" It's sort of that proverbial back seat. How many more miles we got to go?
7. 7 is my continuous answer.
Gotcha.
Seven?
But
Seven
That's just the
from the
stock
start
answer?
of the trip to
so
5 minutes.
it's become a family affair now. So I've got my two boys. My son Christian Andrew. He takes the pictures when we do a book signing, and then Tyler, he's my security man. He makes sure no one steals the models. And then of course Diane takes the money, and I sign the books.
There's so many wonderful.
But you get to
families.
come on the radio.
Yeah,
So many wonderful.
That's the best
photographs,
payoff.
I would love it. Yeah.
family photographs, and just such a glimpse into your life
Well,
throughout it.
But here again, it goes back to following what, in life is being inspired by the previous generation and attaching yourself to something larger, and then working. In other words, get a good attitude and do the right thing, and then seize the opportunity.
So here's my question.
Right.
Back to Remove
Oh, yeah.
Before Flight, the title of the book.
Right. Okay, yeah.
And again, I sound like a literary guy right now myself, but if I were in your shoes and I had written this book and I were thinking, what would be a great title? The fact that this is on the shuttle, and yet the fact that it speaks to your message, remove all the shackles off your shoulders in your own mind before you can soar and be successful. Was that at all in your head when you thought this will be a good match as a title?
It does pay to that. Of course, the Remove Before Flight ribbon is designed to be attached to things that need to be unattached from an item before it flies. So
Right.
anybody in aviation, anybody in aerospace knows that is the number one item they look for.
Sure.
To remove those, the switches and all the things of that nature. So it was really analogous to the fact that I was personally removed before flight. I was the software element of it. I was the human. And so it's really just analogous to that. So it's just really the spin of me being the last guy out of the external tank. And that's what it removed
I
before
see.
flight. Yeah, that's that simple. It's that simple.
So my interpretation was overthought, but plausible.
But plausible, absolutely. Absolutely, go deeper if you wanted to. But the simplistic element is I was removed before flight.
All right.
An
Well, I
amazing
want to
story.
spend this next segment talking asteroids and aliens.
Uh-oh.
We're going
With
to
our
talk
guest,
about
Scott
space.
Phillips,
All right.
author of the book Remove Before Flight. A Huntsville hero and a friend of this radio broadcast. And he doesn't like it when I call him a hero. He just looks at me like, stop that. You look like my dad, who's my hero. Stay with us. We'll be back.
She's smart, cute, and very hairy. Tiki, the official mascot of talk radio for real life. WEKI.
Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Give some stations an hour, and they'll give you heartburn.
I can't believe I ate that whole thing.
Talk radio for real life. WEKI.
Welcome back, my friends. We are coming up on halftime. It is the Will Anderson Show. Happy Monday to you. 256-684-8000. Our telephone number. The book is called Remove Before Flight. Scott Phillips.
Yeah. All right.
A memoir of a space shuttle team member.
Yep.
It's an amazing story.
Well, I appreciate that.
And
Appreciate that.
you wanted to talk about UFOs and aliens.
Oh, boy.
Of
Rachel.
course. We have somebody connected with the space program here. It can't all be nuts and bolts and serious.
Well, that's true.
So, but no, I was asking him earlier during the break, we've seen this big meteor hit Russia. We've heard of other meteors falling. Is this happening more frequently, or is this just reported on more?
Well, obviously, when an asteroid comes across pieces of it, it happens every day. They're just small. So it's extraordinary.
Make it relative. What
Well,
is small?
Well,
'Cause
I mean,
this-
small. Well, like this cup right here, like a
Okay.
styrofoam cup, like a 12-ounce. We have it every day, thousands of these coming in.
Because the last one that I remember really hearing about on the news was the size of a school bus, correct?
Right. And it determines the size. The capability that we have today, we can track some of the larger stuff. Of course, the small stuff, the size here again of the cup or a bread box or something like that, obviously when it comes through the atmosphere, it breaks up. And it usually is in remote areas like over the oceans, things like that. So we're really unaware of those. But the one in Russia, of course, the one that hit back, 100 years ago or 80 years ago back, knocked down. In other words, it was just what they call an airburst. And it knocked down 400 square miles of trees. in the Siberian area. No one died. It was just a remote area, but it knocked down 400 square miles of trees, snapped them like a twig.
But
so the power is awesome.
Most of the surface of the Earth, I think I'm right about this, is covered by water.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So how often do asteroids fall into the ocean and we don't even know about
every
it?
day. Every day. Tens of thousands of cup size, bread box size do. I mean, because it breaks up, obviously through the atmosphere. It's when we take notice when the one's larger, the size of a school bus or a car or something like that. Now, what would be a species killer would be something the size of, this building traveling 6, kilometers per second, would be devastating. Because it would wipe out. Well, just imagine if it hit.
Well, even if it hit the ocean, what would it do?
Well, it could cause a tsunami. And, of course, obviously the coastal areas would suffer, obviously would come in. In fact, if something the size of, Montesano Mountain, hit us, it would be a killer for this planet. And it would throw dust in the air, would block out the sunlight for a century, possibly.
Does missile defense play a role here in stopping this from happening?
Here again, the thing is the next mission really for NASA under the Obama administration is to see, actually marry up to an asteroid. And we've done that. European Space Agency a few weeks ago, landed on one. So it's probably wise to really understand what they're made of, and then to track the large ones, and then to come up with a plan over the next 100 years. I mean, who are you going to call? Not space, Ghostbusters. You're going to call NASA. And you're going to call probably the greatest minds in the world to be able to see how can we deflect a object of that size away from us. Do we paint it? Do we go out and marry up with it and explode it? Or, do we monitor it and all, pray that it doesn't hit us? So
now, when you say do we paint it, what does that mean?
Well, the thing is they're thinking of heat. When you have a big surface, if you paint it, the sun warms it up and it can actually knock it off its pathway. So if you determine it. So there's a lot of...
So if it's headed right for wherever.
Right. If we figure it's headed our way, it's a trajectory we would monitor that, see how close to get, but we'd have to have a plan. We're the only species right now that could actually do that. There's, obviously talk, years that the dinosaurs were wiped out, basically by an asteroid, that actually blocked out the sunlight and, of course, killed the vegetation. And, of course, they all, were extinct. So we could be headed toward that ourselves but here again, our technology for 4,900 years, we rode horses. And
we're finally smart enough to stop this.
Now we actually have a thumb.
And for people who think NASA doesn't directly impact them, and so who cares if the government's cutting funding to NASA? Who cares if the government's pulling back finances?
Right.
If the asteroid is headed for your house, you're going to care.
That's right. Right, yes. and that's at 5 to 7/10% is what we're investing toward that. And I think if you're retiring, you're gonna save more than that. So we need to get NASA back on the stick and get leaders that will support the future generations to be attached to something larger than themselves and possibly save this planet.
And that's the point of your book, Remove Before Flight. Scott Phillips, thank you for being here, sir.
Well, thanks for having me.
Do you have a website real quick?
Yeah, it's removebeforeflightbook.com.
Scott, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come back anytime, and we'll be right back after this.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Guest newsmakers and just some pretty darn interesting people make the Fred Holland Morning Show an enriching commute. Weekday mornings from 6 to 8 on Talk Radio for Real Life, WEKI.